Listen this. You're sitting across from her at dinner, and for just a moment her guard drops. There's something in her eyes, vulnerable, intense, almost desperate, like she's fighting an internal war between what she feels and what she's willing to admit. You've felt it too, haven't you? That electric moment when you catch her looking at you like you're the only person in the room. But the second you meet her gaze, she looks away. When she laughs a little too hard at your jokes, then suddenly becomes distant for no apparent reason. What if I told you that some of the deepest, most passionate feelings a woman will ever have for you are the ones she'll fight hardest to hide? That the woman who seems most confusing, most contradictory, most impossible to read, might actually be the one who's fallen for you the hardest? Here's what most men don't understand. When a woman is scared of her feelings for you, she doesn't just disappear. She doesn't just walk away and never look back. Instead, she creates this complex dance of approach and avoidance, of signals and mixed messages, of moments that make you think she's definitely into me, followed immediately by moments that make you question everything. And most men? They give up during this dance. They misread the signals, get frustrated by the confusion, and walk away just when she needs them to stay the most. But not you. Not after today. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been with a woman who seemed to genuinely enjoy your company, who would text you at random hours, who remembered every little detail about your conversations, but then would suddenly become cold and distant whenever things started to feel too real? Maybe she'd cancel dates at the last minute. Maybe she'd take hours to respond to texts that should have taken minutes. Maybe she'd make excuses about why she couldn't commit to anything serious, even though everything about her behavior suggested she wanted exactly that. If this sounds familiar, you've encountered something that most dating advice completely misses. The woman who's fallen in love but is absolutely terrified of what that means. See, we live in a culture that tells us love should be simple. If she likes you, she'll show it. If she doesn't, she won't, but real life is messier than that. Real emotions are more complicated. The truth is, some of the strongest feelings create the strongest fears. Think about it. If you didn't care about someone, rejection wouldn't hurt. But when you're genuinely falling for someone, the stakes feel impossibly high. The potential for pain becomes overwhelming. This is especially true for women who've been hurt before, who've opened their hearts only to have them broken. For women who've learned that vulnerability is dangerous, that showing too much too soon can drive men away. Today, I'm going to decode the hidden language these women speak, the secret signs that reveal when a woman is madly in love with you but scared out of her mind to show it. We're going to explore 5 specific behaviors that most men completely misinterpret, and by the end of this, you'll never again mistake fear for disinterest. Because here's what I've learned after years of studying human behavior. Sometimes the women who seem the most complicated are actually the most straightforward, once you understand what they're really trying to tell you. Let me tell you about Sarah and Mike. They met at a coffee shop, started talking, and had an instant connection. Sarah found herself texting Mike late into the night, sharing stories she hadn't told anyone in years. They went on 3 amazing dates, and Mike was starting to think this could be something special. Then suddenly, Sarah became a ghost. She'd take 6 hours to respond to texts that used to get instant replies. She canceled their 4th date, claiming she was swamped with work. When Mike suggested they make plans for the weekend, she said she needed to take things slow. Mike was confused and hurt. The mixed signals were driving him crazy. So he did what most men do. He backed off, assuming she wasn't really interested. Big mistake. 2 weeks later, Sarah texted him out of the blue. "Hey, how was your presentation at work? I know you were nervous about it." Mike had mentioned this presentation once in passing 3 weeks earlier. She'd been thinking about him, caring about his life, even while she was pulling away. This is the first sign a woman is in love but scared, the push-pull dynamic. Here's what's really happening in her mind. Part of her is falling hard. She genuinely enjoys your company, feels a real connection, maybe even fantasizes about a future with you, but another part of her is terrified. Maybe her last relationship ended badly. Maybe she's been burned by men who seemed perfect at first but turned out to be players. Maybe she's just not ready for the intensity of what she's feeling. So she does the only thing that feels safe. She creates distance to protect herself from getting hurt. But here's the key. She never fully walks away. The woman who's not interested in you will make it easy for you to move on. She'll be consistently unavailable, consistently unresponsive, consistently uninterested. But the woman who's scared of her feelings for you, she can't stay away even when she's trying to. You'll notice this pattern. She pulls back, but she remembers details about your life. She acts distant, but she still initiates contact sometimes. She says she wants to take things slow, but her actions suggest she's thinking about you constantly. This push-pull isn't manipulation, it's internal conflict. She's literally fighting with herself, and you're witnessing that battle play out in her behavior. The key is recognizing this pattern for what it is. Not rejection, but fear. Not disinterest, but overwhelming interest that she doesn't know how to handle. Most men give up during this phase because it's confusing and frustrating. But the men who understand what's really happening, who can stay consistent and patient while she works through her fears, these are the men who end up with the deepest, most passionate relationships. Here's something fascinating about human psychology. We can control our words. We can control our actions, but our emotional reactions? Those are much harder to fake. Let me paint you a picture. You're texting with her, having a casual conversation, and you mention that you went to lunch with a female coworker. Suddenly, the tone of the conversation shifts. Her responses become shorter. Maybe she throws in a sarcastic comment like, "Oh, sounds like fun," or "I'm sure she enjoyed that." Or maybe you post a photo on social media with a group of friends, and there happens to be a woman in the picture. Suddenly, she's asking questions. "Who's that? How do you know her? You guys seem close." Then when you point out that she seems a little jealous, she immediately backpedals. "Jealous? No, I was just curious. I don't care who you hang out with. We're not even exclusive. Sound familiar?" This is the second sign. Jealousy disguised as casual interest or covered up with fake indifference. Here's what most men don't understand. Jealousy is an involuntary emotional response. You can't fake it, and you can't easily suppress it. When a woman feels threatened by another woman in your life, even when she has no right to feel that way, it reveals how much she actually cares about you. Think about it logically. If she didn't have feelings for you, why would she care who else you spend time with? If she was truly indifferent, other women in your life would be irrelevant to her. But when she's fallen for you, even if she's trying to hide it, her emotional investment becomes impossible to conceal. Every other woman becomes potential competition. Every female friend becomes a threat. Every casual mention of another woman triggers that primal fear. What if he chooses her instead of me? The woman who's genuinely not interested won't care if you mention other women. She might even encourage you to date someone else. But the woman who's in love but scared, she'll care deeply, even when she tries to pretend she doesn't. I remember coaching a client named James who was dealing with exactly this situation. The woman he was dating, Lisa, would always make sarcastic comments whenever he mentioned female friends or coworkers. She'd roll her eyes, change the subject, or make jokes about how popular he was with women. James interpreted this as criticism or negativity. He thought she was trying to control him or didn't trust him. But when we dug deeper, we realized what was really happening. Lisa was head over heels for James, but she was terrified of being vulnerable enough to admit it. Her jealousy was her heart betraying her head. Once James understood this, he could respond to her jealousy with reassurance instead of defensiveness. He could see it for what it really was, not an attack on his character, but evidence of how much he meant to her. The key insight here is this: pay attention not just to what she says, but to how she reacts emotionally. Her emotions will tell you the truth, even when her words are trying to hide it. There's an old saying, actions speak louder than words. But when it comes to women who are scared of their feelings, actions whisper the truths that words refuse to shout. Let me tell you about the kind of attention that reveals everything. You mention once, just once, that you have an important meeting on Thursday. Wednesday night she texts, "Good luck tomorrow. You're going to crush it." You barely remember telling her about it, but she remembered, and she cared enough to reach out. You complain about being stressed at work, and the next week she sends you an article about stress management techniques. You mention that you love a particular type of coffee, and suddenly she happens to be in the area with your favorite drink. You tell a story about your childhood, about a fear you had or a dream you chased, and months later she references it in a conversation. She's been carrying your words with her, thinking about them, holding on to pieces of who you are. This is the third sign. She pays obsessive attention to details about your life, even when she's pretending to be casual about the relationship. Here's what's happening psychologically. When we're falling in love, our brains become hyper-attentive to everything about that person. We notice things we wouldn't normally notice. We remember conversations we'd usually forget. We care about details that would typically seem insignificant. But for the woman who's scared of her feelings, she can't express this care directly. She can't say, "I think about you constantly," or "Everything you tell me matters to me." That would be too vulnerable, too revealing. So instead, she shows it through 1,000 small actions. She demonstrates her care through thoughtfulness rather than words. She proves her investment through attention to detail rather than grand gestures. Most men completely miss this because we're trained to look for obvious signs of interest. The woman who tells us directly how she feels, who makes the first move, who wears her heart on her sleeve. But the scared woman speaks a different language. I worked with a client named David who was frustrated because the woman he was dating, Amanda, never talked about the future. She never brought up being exclusive, never mentioned where the relationship was heading. David started to think she wasn't serious about him, but when we analyzed her behavior, a different picture emerged. Amanda remembered everything David told her about his family, his goals, his fears, his favorite movies, his childhood pets. She'd bring him soup when he was sick, remember his work schedule, ask about his friends by name. She was building a detailed map of his life in her mind, storing away every piece of information like precious treasure. This isn't something you do for someone you're casual about. This is what you do when someone becomes central to your world. The woman who's not invested in you will listen politely to your stories and forget them by the next day. But the woman who's fallen for you, even if she's scared to admit it, will hold on to every word like it matters. Because to her it does. This kind of attention is actually more meaningful than grand romantic gestures because it's consistent, it's thoughtful, and it requires genuine care. Anyone can buy flowers or write a romantic text, but remembering the small details of someone's life, caring about their daily struggles, celebrating their minor victories, that takes real emotional investment. When you start noticing this pattern, when you realize she remembers everything, notices everything, cares about everything related to your life, you're seeing love in action, even when it's too scared to speak its name. There's this moment that happens in relationships, maybe you've experienced it. She opens up to you in a way that feels profound and real. Maybe she tells you about her past, shares a fear, reveals something vulnerable about herself. In that moment, you feel incredibly close to her. You think, this is it. This is where we move to the next level. Then seemingly out of nowhere, she disappears emotionally. She becomes distant, takes longer to respond to texts, seems guarded in conversations. It's like she shared too much and now she's retreating to safety. This is the fourth sign, the vulnerability cycle. Understanding this pattern is crucial because most men interpret this retreat as rejection or loss of interest. They think, she opened up to me, we had this amazing connection, and now she's pulling away. She must have realized she doesn't actually like me. But here's what's really happening. She's scared of how much she revealed and how good it felt to reveal it. Let me explain the psychology behind this. When we're falling in love, sharing vulnerabilities creates intense intimacy. It's like emotional nakedness, exhilarating, but terrifying. For someone who's been hurt before, this level of intimacy can trigger every defense mechanism they have. Think about it from her perspective. She just showed you a part of herself that she normally keeps hidden. She trusted you with something precious. And in that moment of sharing, she probably felt more connected to you than she has to anyone in a long time. That's beautiful, but it's also scary as hell. Because now she's thinking, what if he uses this against me? What if I've shown him too? Much too soon? What if he thinks I'm damaged or broken? What if I'm falling faster than he is? So she retreats. Not because she doesn't care, but because she cares too much. Not because the connection wasn't real, but because it was too real. I remember working with a client named Chris who was dating a woman named Rachel. During their third date, Rachel opened up about her difficult relationship with her father and how it had affected her ability to trust men. Chris felt honored that she'd shared something so personal, and they ended the evening feeling incredibly connected. Then Rachel went radio silent for 4 days. When she finally texted back, she was polite but distant. Chris was confused and hurt. He thought maybe he'd said something wrong, or maybe she regretted opening up to him. But what was really happening was that Rachel was processing the intensity of what she'd shared and how safe she'd felt sharing it. She was falling for Chris, and that terrified her because her past experiences had taught her that men leave when things get too real. Her retreat wasn't about Chris at all. It was about her own fear of being vulnerable again. The key insight here is that this cycle, opening up followed by retreating, is actually a positive sign, not a negative one. It means she feels safe enough with you to be vulnerable, even if she's scared of that safety. The wrong response is to chase her when she retreats or to get frustrated by the pattern. The right response is to stay consistent, remain emotionally available, and give her space to process without taking it personally. When you understand that, her retreat is about fear, not disinterest. You can respond with patience instead of panic. You can see it as evidence of how much you mean to her, not how little. The women who never retreat, who are always emotionally available, who never seem scared or vulnerable, they might be easier to read, but they're probably not falling as hard. The woman who's scared of her feelings for you is the woman for whom those feelings are powerful enough to be frightening. They say the eyes are the windows to the soul, and nowhere is this more true than with a woman who's trying to hide her feelings. You can control your words, you can regulate your behavior, but your eyes tell the truth whether you want them to or not. This is the 5th and most powerful sign. Her eyes reveal everything her mouth refuses to say. Picture this scenario. You're in a group setting, everyone's talking and laughing, but you catch her looking at you when she thinks no one's watching. Not just glancing, really looking. Studying your face, watching how you interact with others, observing you with the kind of attention that suggests she finds you endlessly fascinating. When you catch her staring, what happens? She immediately looks away. Maybe blushes, definitely seems flustered. If she didn't have feelings for you, getting caught looking wouldn't be embarrassing. But because she does have feelings she's trying to hide, being caught reveals more than she intended. Or maybe you're talking to her, and you notice her eyes doing something subtle but unmistakable. They soften when she looks at you. There's a warmth there, a tenderness that doesn't match her careful words. Her mouth might be saying, "We're just friends," or "I'm not looking for anything serious." But her eyes are telling a completely different story. Here's what most men don't know. Eye contact patterns reveal emotional investment better than almost anything else. When a woman is falling for you, she can't help but look at you differently than she looks at everyone else. I want to share a story about my client Marcus and a woman named Elena. They worked together, and Marcus was convinced Elena wasn't interested in him romantically because she always kept their conversations professional and never flirted openly. But he started noticing something. During meetings, Elena's eyes would always find his. When he was presenting, she'd watch him with complete focus. When he was talking to other people, he'd catch her observing from across the room. One day, a mutual friend mentioned that Elena always seemed to know what Marcus was up to at work, which projects he was working on, when he was traveling, who he was collaborating with. How did she know all this? Because she was paying attention in a way that went far beyond professional interest. Her eyes were tracking him, studying him, drinking him in whenever she thought she could get away with it. This kind of visual attention is involuntary. You can't fake it, and you can't really suppress it. When someone becomes important to you, your eyes naturally seek them out. You notice them in a crowd. You watch how they move, how they interact with others, how they react to different situations. But here's the key insight. The woman who's scared of her feelings will try to hide this visual attention. She'll look away quickly when caught. She'll pretend she was looking at something else. She'll seem embarrassed or flustered when your eyes meet. The woman who's not interested won't have this problem because there's nothing to hide. She can look at you or not look at you without any emotional charge. But the woman who's fallen for you can't control where her eyes want to go, and she can't control her reaction when she's caught. Pay attention to the quality of her gaze, not just the frequency. Does she look at you with curiosity, with warmth, With a kind of softness that seems reserved just for you? Does she seem to be memorizing your face, storing away the image for later? These aren't conscious choices she's making. They're involuntary responses to having fallen for someone she's not ready to admit she's fallen for. The eyes don't lie, even when everything else is trying to. When you start noticing how she looks at you, really looks at you, you'll understand more about her feelings than any conversation could reveal. So here you are, armed with the secret language that women speak when they're too scared to speak plainly. You now understand that hot and cold behavior isn't necessarily rejection. It might be internal conflict. That jealousy disguised as sarcasm reveals how much she cares. That attention to details shows love in action. That vulnerability followed by retreat is a natural cycle of someone learning to trust, and that her eyes will always tell you the truth even when her words won't. But knowing these signs is only half the battle. The real question is, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Here's my challenge to you. Stop interpreting confusing behavior as rejection. Stop assuming that complicated means uninterested. Stop giving up on women who are sending you mixed signals. Because those mixed signals might be the clearest communication you'll ever receive about how much you actually mean to someone. The next time you encounter a woman who seems to be pulling away just as things get good, ask yourself, is she really not interested or is she scared? Is she really indifferent? Or is she protecting herself from feelings that feel too big to handle? Because here's what I've learned. The women who are the most scared of love are often the ones capable of the deepest love. The women who guard their hearts most carefully are the ones whose hearts are most worth winning. The women who seem the most complicated are often the most straightforward. Once you learn to speak their language, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to become the kind of man who doesn't run when love gets complicated, who doesn't give up when signals get mixed, who understands that sometimes the greatest prize requires the greatest patience. Be the man who can see through the fear to the love beneath it. Be the man who can stay consistent when she's inconsistent. Be the man who can offer safety to someone who's forgotten what safety feels like. Because when you finally break through those walls, when you finally help her feel safe enough to show you what's really in her heart, you won't just have won her love, you'll have earned it. And earned love, fought for love, love that had to overcome fear and doubt and past pain. That's the kind of love that lasts forever. The question isn't whether you're capable of this. The question is whether you're willing to try. Stop waiting for love to be easy. Start recognizing love when it's scared. Your future self, and the woman who's too afraid to tell you how she feels, will thank you for it.